In our last session, we introduced two of the bad guy characters, the dragon, Satan, who rises up a beast which many believe to be the Antichrist. And in rising up the beast, we see the creation, in some people's view, of a one-world system that seeks to push God out by combining a sort of pseudo-religious and political, commercial, worldwide system in order to control and push out the people of God. In the second half of chapter 13, we see a third character being risen up, and this character is described as the beast from the earth. We said yesterday that the sea represents chaos, and so the beast from the sea is very much being brought out of the chaos, being brought out of the depths. The beast from the earth seems to imply that this is a natural person who already exists within the earth, who's being given authority. What we see as we read through chapter 13 is that this second beast, he's given all of the authority of the first beast, and he has a very clearly stated purpose. And this purpose is to create a spiritual authority specifically to worship the beast, the first beast that came out. Remember, we talked about this idea of a pseudo-religious political system. Well, the first beast seems to have the political authority of the nations of the world, whereas the second beast seems to have the religious authority of the world. And there's a picture here of a religious political rule. And if we look through history, we can see that very often religion and politics have been bedfellows that have come together in order to dominate, control people. And when we look at the second beast, we see this second beast coming up that has the appearance of a lamb but with two horns. And that potentially points towards this joining of a political religious system. What we also read is that the second beast does outstanding miracles. He calls down fire from heaven. And again, we see this sort of similarity to the prophet Elijah and to the two witnesses who were killed at the midway point of the tribulation. In other words, what we have here is a counterfeit prophet, or what's sometimes called a false prophet who's being raised up. What we have is a picture of this religious, political, commercial society being created. And remember that Jesus prophesied this in Matthew 24:24 when he said that there will be false prophets. And this second beast from the earth, this is the beast who creates the mark of the beast as a means for people to trade, where he requires people to worship the beast and have the mark of the beast in order to trade. Very much there seems to be this religious political coming together in order to come against the purposes of God. For us to fully grasp exactly what's trying to be communicated through this sort of imagery that's being used, I want us to think back to the Old Testament, and frequently through the Old Testament we read of Babylon as being the nation which historically has always represented the enemies of God, the idolatry, blasphemous persecution of the people of God. You remember it was Babylon that carried off the nation of Israel into captivity. And Babylon throughout the Bible is an image of, I suppose, the demonic opposition to God. And Babylon is seated on the Euphrates. And remember the prophecies that we read through Revelation about the Euphrates being dried up. These three bad guys, the dragon, the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth, they seem to be creating this worldwide system, this worldwide political, economic control in order to suppress and govern the earth. And this seems to be clearly in opposition to the kingdom of God and the values of the kingdom of God. For us to unpack that, if we look in Revelation 17, we get this picture of this prostitute, or what's called the great harlot, sitting on many waters. And we get told in chapter 17 verse 15 that these waters represent the masses of people of every nation and language. This prostitute seems to represent a religious coming together, a religious unifying of all these sort of worldwide religions. And this is why so many people would come up and oppose the idea of what you might have heard about interfaith worship, the unifying of different religious systems. And what we see in these end times is that this Babylon, this prostitute, seems to represent the coming together of a spiritual adultery where all the religions are combined together. And this is why we see the worship of God being pushed out. It's why we see the witnesses being martyred for their faith, because they won't accept this false religion. And what we see is that this false religious system seems to have a specific role in the end times. In chapter 17, this prostitute, this harlot, is seen to be sitting on the scarlet beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. So again, we get this picture of this religious unifying system being very much linked with the false beast. And it indicates that the way that the first beast seeks to control the nations is initially through bringing together this unifying way of worship. But appearances can be deceptive. We see that this harlot is described as being clothed with luxury, with purple, with gold, with scarlet, and contrasts very much with the woman in Revelation 12 that is a picture of the church. And again, what we see is the devil seeming to counterfeit the things of God. However, what we then see is that this first beast, once he's conquered and he's got this worldwide control, he does away with this prostitute. He deposes of this prostitute, and we can see that when we come into our next session.